Okay, hello, and welcome to our next Security Middle East Magazine webinar. I'm delighted to be hosting this live fireside chat with Dr. Michael Ehrlich, who is the Chief Technology Officer at IronNet Cybersecurity. Now, Michael brings over 20 years of experience to IronNet, both in offensive and defensive cybersecurity operations, cybersecurity-related policy development, engineering design, integration, and he has a lot of experience with the NSA in the States, spanning both engineering development, operations, and leadership positions. Now, I'm really excited for this chat, and it's very, very timely. It's no secret, really, that the Ukraine-Russia conflict has contributed towards a range of cyber threats worldwide, with many governments claiming that nation states' cyber-related activity has risen, and there's no real sign that it's going to stop. So now this isn't just simple data breaches anymore. We're seeing serious impacts to critical national infrastructure, including entire internet takedowns, which can have damaging impacts on operational capabilities, but also the livelihoods of millions worldwide. But Michael, thank you so much for joining us. We know you've been in the industry for a fair amount of time. I've seen that in 2007, you actually helped draft portions of the National Cyber Initiative. But how does the state of cybersecurity today compare to then 15 years ago? What are your perspectives on that?
So first of all, thanks for having me, and everybody out there listening live, thank you for joining. I think there are two or three main areas that have changed over the last 15 years. If we were to go back, it seems like so long ago, doesn't it? 15 years ago, 13 years ago, whatever it was, sort of the attacks that were happening then from the criminal side, right? From the criminal side, we're really focused on things like credit card number theft. And so for the criminal to monetize what they do, right, they would have to access credit card information and then somehow sell that or use that. It was really a two-step process. So today, obviously that's changed. Now it's a one-step process in what we call ransomware. And so the criminal element of cyber has figured out a much more effective way to monetize their skill set, right? Get access to an enterprise, spread throughout that enterprise, steal your IP, which they always used to do, right? Steal your IP, and then shut down your enterprise with ransomware. And over the last 10 years or so, where ransomware has really become prevalent, the other technology that's helped that is cryptocurrency, right? 10 years ago, it would be very hard for me to demand $1 million ransom and get paid in funds that could not be traced. But today, that is very easy to do. So the criminal element has moved on from stealing credit card information, things like that, to rapid monetization of what they do. So that's one big change. I think the other big change, and where the world will continue to go, is, prior to about 10 years ago, 2010 it was, so 12 years ago, prior to that, you had nation state attacks, but they were mostly focused, again, on stealing some sort of intellectual property from your adversaries, from or whomever. And back in 2010, with the advent of Stuxnet in Iran, that was the very first time that there was a cyber attack that led to real physical damage, right? And not just shutting something down, but real physical damage, right? Things being destroyed. And so we all know that capability exists out there. It's something everyone is worried about, whether the adversary is whether it's in our oil refineries that can do something, our nuclear plants, our manufacturing facilities, our drug facilities, whatever it is, that concern, I think, is stronger now than it has ever been. So I think those are sort of two of the big areas anyway.
Okay, thank you. I guess I mean the nation state activity is sort of pivoted towards kind of operational financial damage there, and you mentioned the criminality element changing. So why are current approaches to security and cyber risk management as a profession not working? Cyber gets a lot more attention now than it ever has. So why are we struggling to cope so much at the moment?
Yeah, well, so the first thing I would say is, probably 15 of the last 22 years of my life have been spent on the offense, developing offensive cyber capabilities. And we have to remember that the folks that do that are good at what they do. They are as well or better funded than the defender, right? And they're clever, they're innovative, and they often have they're often lucky in the fact that they don't have to fit within a world of policy and regulation and law, right? So they operate outside of all those things. And oftentimes on the defensive side, we sometimes get bogged down, and we strive sometimes, not everyone, but many organizations strive more for compliance than for security, right? More to meet regulatory frameworks than for security. So that's one of the reasons. I think the other big reason is that we still fight individually, right? So, it's what I keep telling people, it's not my organization against the advanced threat. It's not, Dan, it's not yours, right? It's, we shouldn't be fighting this game individually, right? It is literally all of us against them, but we don't act operationally that way. Yeah, we say we share information, and maybe I'm a member of a little community of organizations that meet once a month over drinks or food, and we go around saying, what's happening. We don't really want to disclose too much. And that's not the way the adversary works. The adversary says, hey, everybody, hey, all my adversary friends, right? Hey, all my criminal friends, I found a new way into this company, and here's how I've done it. I found a new exploit that works against Log4j, and here's how I've operationalized it, right? And so we still don't do that. We don't fight as a team, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think what we've seen in our own research is attackers are agile, they're well funded, and they are very, very good at what they do. But you mentioned that as well, that they're very good at what they do. So are we just not as good, or what is missing there in terms of, you mentioned kind of the collective defense piece there, which I really want to touch upon. I'm a bit more, I would say, skeptical about the notion of collective defense. I mean, NATO is a perfect example of that. Obviously the long-standing military alliance that's out there. And how do you think that would work in reality? How would organizations integrate themselves with one another rather than a kind of a military or a government approach to it? What's your perspective on that?
So I think there's lots of ways you can talk about working together, right? In collaboration. When I talk about collective defense, and I'm just talking for me here, yeah. What I mean is really a few things. First of all, it is making use of more cybersecurity data across a broad range of organizations than we do today, right? Yeah, like you said, the defenders are good. Well, the offense is good too. The defenders are good. They've got lots of tools. You've got, everyone probably on this call has tools in their enterprise that alert on various things. And generally, for, many alerts are false positives, or they're not particularly severe. And no one other than the one or two people that do the triage get the benefit of knowing that something else is benign, right? So when I'm talking about collective defense, what I really mean is the ability to aggregate all of that sort of low-level detection data, whether or not a human's looked at it, right? It shouldn't be on us, on people, to drive this technology forward. And so if we can aggregate this data in an anonymous fashion, so I can't point back to you, right? If we can do that, then we can draw insights from that data that help us, identify attacks faster, help actually drive collaboration, not rely on, gee, do I know Dan? Should I call him up and ask him? But actually connect people because they are experiencing similar things, similar effects in their enterprise, even if they're in different organizations, right? And so, how will nations work together like NATO? That's probably a bigger, more complicated thing. But there's certainly a more straightforward path to how organizations can work together.
Yeah. See, I think there's a bit of convergence there, right? Because if we look at geopolitical alliances and we look at the structure of NATO, I had a really interesting conversation with a South African CISO not too long ago. And he mentioned that they've got a blend of technologies and systems within their network. They had US, Chinese, and Russian infrastructure, so quite the mix. So what are your kind of perspectives on technology and implementation and the role that will play, but kind of through that lens of alliances, information sharing, and things like that?
Yeah. So I know you I'm sure everyone on the call understands the position that the US has taken on critical foreign technology, not foreign technology, but from 2 or 3 countries where we try not to implement it. And that's simply because, if you design, manufacture the equipment, you can do anything you want in there. You can do anything you want in there, right? So for folks that have deployed equipment perhaps from manufacturers in countries that they now have concern with, let's say, right? You need to, just like anything, you need to do a better job monitoring. You need to have the tools in place that allow you to understand what is happening in your enterprise, what is happening on your network, what is happening on your endpoints. And moreover, you need the people that given the data understand, right, that can make use to it. I sometimes when I give talks, I have a slide with a giant F1 car behind me, right? And my point of the slide is that you can put me in a race driving one of those cars. I can have the best technology in the world, but I am not going to win the race, right? I may be competitive because of my tools, but at the end of the day, a lot of times it falls down to the people. It falls down to the teams you've had, the training they've had, to win the day. And so I think that's a long way. The whole third-party due diligence is tough. It's really a tough game. First of all, the third party is going to answer the way that you hope they do, because otherwise they don't get your business. I can't possibly go through source code and understand what is happening in a product I didn't write, right? So those are all real challenges. And so when you can't do any of those things, really the best you can do and what you should do is have visibility into your network, understand what's on your network, understand what should be happening, and understand when something changes, whether for the good or bad, understand what changes and what's driving that change. Yeah,
awesome. So just building on from that, so types of, I guess, technologies are needed then for the future to transform cybersecurity, in your opinion? You mentioned collective defense as a form of data gathering and data sharing, but
yeah.
What kind of tangible technologies can we implement now?
So, I think most organizations, most large organizations that take cybersecurity seriously, have already probably what I would call the minimum set, right? So the things like firewalls and web proxies, everyone has those now, and you need to, right? You need to raise the bar to make it hard for entry. A good adversary will be able to defeat those quite handily, right? Doesn't mean you shouldn't have them. You still need them, because not everyone is a good adversary. I think there's so many tools out there. There's identity management tools. There's all sorts of things that we need as we live in a more connected world, as we move to cloud services. Many organizations implement EDR, right? Endpoint detection and response capabilities, and those are needed for a number of reasons, both for vulnerability management, for patching, for updating, for controlling what applications you have running. Those are very important. But again, a good adversary will be able to subvert your endpoint agents, right? And so if you are facing a good adversary, what I always recommend is something that actually inspects and analyzes the network traffic. Because if your adversaries in your network, even if they can defeat your firewalls and your endpoint agents and your web proxies and even your identity and authorization things, right? The one thing they must do is they must be on your network. Their traffic must be there. It may look like something else. It may be obfuscated or encrypted, but fundamentally there is a connection from your organization out to your adversary. And sometimes the best way of finding that is in the network traffic. The network traffic thing started with very simple IDSs, IPSs, which have now sort of morphed into the next generation firewalls. But those are all rules-based, and rules are important. Don't get me wrong. Signatures are important. They let us look out for things that have happened somewhere from a week ago to 10 years ago and be able to spot those. But they're not very good for finding the new attacks, right? And so you really need, I really don't like the letters AIML, because AI does nothing for you without a lot of really good people and modelers and data sets and everything like that. But fundamentally, you need algorithms that learn about your environment, that apply some level of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and can understand when an anomaly is present in your network that is potentially malicious, right? That can identify specific behaviors in your network that are potentially malicious. And so I think the rise of the NDR, not EDR, but NDR platform is going to be more important if you're really interested, really committed to improving your enterprise cybersecurity.
Absolutely. I think it's about providing the people with the relevant and right tools to do their job more effectively and protect the wider organization. We've got time for a couple more questions. So I want to pivot back to the kind of rhetoric that I was talking about at the beginning around Ukraine and Russia. And I guess it's on the lips of every CISO I'm speaking to at the moment, so it's hard to get around it. So how do you see the cyber warfare developing based on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine at the moment?
So it's been a very interesting time. It's been a very interesting time. Certainly, from the Russian perspective, I think they have used I think they've used a small fraction of their capabilities to aid in their goal of whatever their goal is. I'm not certain whether it's to take over or to destroy Ukraine, but certainly they are doing the latter trying to do the former. And so, you know, if you look at the security reporting, starting in late December, early January, you know, Microsoft identified new strains of effectively the wiper viruses that were targeting Ukraine government, just to start softening up that target, right? And then just prior to Ukraine, to Russia actually moving into Ukraine, there was the Viasat terminal attacks that took down terminals, you know, not just in Ukraine, but in a lot of the neighboring countries as well. And so I think that was all easy takings for the Russians, right? Just to start softening up the target a little bit. I don't think, you know, when this started, the warning, at least in the US, was, oh my gosh, things are going to be crazy. And things haven't gotten crazy. And there may be slight upticks in some countries, right? Certainly in the border countries around Ukraine and Eastern Europe, there have been upticks. But in the US, we haven't felt that. And people are always like, well, why? And again, from an attacker perspective, from an offensive perspective, to me, access is king. Access is the most important thing. Once I lose access, once I give away the fact that I have access, it often takes me years to reestablish access in a network that I am trying to exploit. And so, I mean, if you look at the news, Russia, Putin, whoever, is achieving their goal, is achieving their outcome without having to put cyber tools into widespread use, right? And so if they can do that, then they don't give away their hand, right? Because, you know, we often talk about cyber as an element of national power, right? Russia perhaps has the capability, China, Iran, North Korea, maybe has the capability, maybe, of doing destructive attacks like we talked about earlier. But those are use once weapons, right? Yeah. It's the cyber weapon is not like a missile, right? If I'm hit with a missile, I know what a missile looks like. I know how fast it goes. I know what its range is. I still can't protect myself from it easily, right? Even if they shoot 10 missiles at me today, a year from now, I can't protect myself easily. Cyber weapons are different, right? Once a cyber weapon is used, once you know I have access in your network, you are going to do everything you can to keep me out. You know my tools, my techniques, my procedures, and you know once you use them, the world will know also, right? IOCs will go out, threat intelligence will go out, and if it's good threat intel, it will pinpoint exactly how I counter that weapon. And so, you know, weapons are things you don't want to use every day in the cyber world. And so that's why I think we haven't seen the extent that we have, because Russia doesn't need to use them right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if you look at the news and some other security commentators, Russia is spreading misinformation. It's disruptive. There's disintegration of trust. And one of the major threats we've seen is collateral damage. As you said, if someone puts out a potential threat, it might not be a primary impact. It could spread like wildfire, like NotPetya or WannaCry or any of those incidents as well. Look, we've got time for one more question, and I'd probably like to use this as a closing statement for you, if you don't mind. You're probably far more qualified than many other people to do this, so I'd like you to look into your crystal ball and tell us what's next for cyber threats at a state and individual level, and what does the future of cybersecurity look like for you?
Yeah, so I think the future of cybersecurity is a scary place, right? If you just do a simple comparison in 10 years, the capability of the attack to operationalize what they do very quickly. I mean, look at Log4j, right? That was announced as a vulnerability, and with I think about half an hour, there were already attacks from some well-known APT groups. Now, they may have known about it beforehand and said, oh my gosh, we only have a small window now, or they may have developed something on the fly. But fundamentally, the ability for the attacker, like you said, they're agile, the ability for the attacker to pivot, to innovate, and to monetize what they do is just getting better for them. On the defensive side, we've got great technologies coming up also, absolutely. But one of the things the attackers have going for them also is that you've heard this before, right? That often the weakest link in your defenses are all the people in your company, right? Phishing 10 years ago wasn't a big thing. Phishing today is, the number one initial access vector, right? And the folks that are phishing, they don't misspell words anymore, right? And with the spear phishing or the whale phishing, it is becoming very difficult for the common user to understand what is real and what is not. So I think the targeting of people for access will increase in very novel ways. I think you'll see it move from email to social platforms, right? We already get phishing in text messages now, right? So I think it's going to require just a much more computer savvy population around the world to counter that threat. One of my real concerns is how we deal with the concept of identity. You mentioned that the Russians are doing a great job at disinformation. I mean, it's one of their fortes. They are magnificent of it. And spoofing identity, right, is a form of disinformation. How do you know who you're talking with, who you're listening to online, who is posting on Facebook or whatever, right, are actually the people you think they are? How do you know they're even real? So I think the concept of identity has a lot of big consequences for us going forward. I think about it. I have no way of proving that I am Michael Ehrlich anymore, because of all the breaches I've been a part of. Everyone knows, my parents' names, where I lived, the color of my house when I grew up. Everybody knows everything about me, right? And so how do I prove I'm me? And it turns out today, and this is scary, that I have a cell phone number associated with me that everyone believes is my phone. And so, I get authentication apps that work here. I've got an email address that I can say, oh yes, it's me, let me log in. But that's a very frail framework, Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the future. I think the criminal element's going to be more active because they've been very effective. It's been very effective for them. I think the nation state is going to rise because, relatively speaking, cyber is cheap on the offensive side. And I think that the defenders are going to need to do a much better job monitoring their networks, understanding what's actually on their networks, to adequately defend their enterprise.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that summary, and Michael, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
You're very, very busy, but thank you for joining us at Security Middle East Magazine, and thank you to the listeners as well for taking some time out, joining live. This session will be available on demand, so for anyone's colleagues or friends that might want to listen in, you obviously can do. But Michael, thank you once again for your time, and everyone on the line, have a great week, and hopefully we can see you very soon on some more of the webinars. So thank you for joining. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.